everyone, and welcome to the first of your Excel labs. You'll notice that we now have an Excel Lab 1 revised file. Please make sure that you're working on the revised file because there may or may not be compatibility issues if you're using a Mac computer with the original upload. So please make sure you're working off the revised file. If you're not, please go back to eAssign, download the new revised file, and that's the one you'll want to upload to eAssign as well. And again, your best bet is to use a PC for these assignments. I understand that some of you have a Mac and it may work for all of the labs and it may have some glitches. But the one thing I can guarantee you is if you have a PC, it should work for everything. Okay, so for the first, what we would call worksheet, when we talk about all the worksheets in a file, we refer to all of the worksheets as a workbook. So the workbook we have here is entitled Excel Lab 1 Revised. However, we have 5 worksheets. To move worksheets around, you can click on any worksheet and drag them, and you can reorder where they are. You can right-click on a worksheet and you can rename that worksheet. You can highlight a tab a different color, a worksheet tab. So if I click down on this worksheet and then I tab color, I could make this one green. There's all kinds of things we can do. We can duplicate a worksheet. If I click the worksheet and hit the control key, or on a Mac it's probably command, and then drag it over, you'll see the little plus symbol, and I'll drop it here. And now I've duplicated, you see I have a second version of text. I can delete that. It's permanently deleted now. So we can duplicate, we can drag, we can change the names, we can change the colors. There's all kinds of things we can do to keep our worksheets in order in a workbook. So let's go no color here. All right, now, so those are just some little tidbits. Now what you're going to do for your assignment is you're going to, on this first worksheet, you're going to fill in all of these yellow spaces. And for the first exercise, we want to create a column containing the full names. We want to put Tammy Smith's name with Ashley Hall, Brandon Johnson, etc. There are 2 ways where you could do this. So I'm going to show you a function that you can use called the concatenate function. There are other ways to do this, but specifically I would like you to use the concatenate function. Now, what I'm going to say right now is very important. I'm actually going to type it up here. Follow my formulas exactly for full credit. So what you want to do is when you're doing these assignments, you want to be sure that you do follow my formulas exactly to get the full credit. And the only reason I say that, I don't mean to say that there's only one way to do something, because there's not. I'm going to Control Z. Control Z undoes all of that. But it's not that there's only one way to complete these assignments. It's just that when we have hundreds of students in the course, if you do something different than the way I've done it, the computer, eAssign, may grade you, may deduct a score from you that really you deserve to have. So long story short, your best way to ensure the most credit is to just follow along exactly like I said in class. You do what I do, then you'll learn the skill. Is there more than one way to get an answer that I have? Absolutely. That's the thing in Excel. There are several ways to get the same answer. And it's very hard for the system to recognize all of those several ways. So if we all do everything the same, then everything will work out in the end. And I'll reiterate that in lecture. But so, and obviously you don't need this here, so let's just go clear this out. So now for the first part, what we'll use is the concatenate function, because I want you to know about functions. And you start off to have a function or a formula. You're going to start with your equal sign. And I'm going to start to type the word concatenate. And what concatenate does is it joins several text strings into one text string. Double click there. And what are my text strings I want to put together? Well, I want to put Tammy, comma, to notice how text 2 highlights now, with Smith. But watch what happens. End parenthesis. I have Tammy Smith, which looks fine, but I don't have a space between her name. If I want a space between her name, which you will want to get full credit, you want concatenate, B7, comma, and then you put a quote, a space, another quote, a comma, and then C7. And what this will do is it will insert a space, and that space needs to be in quotes. It will insert a space in between her first name and last name. Now, due to what we call relative referencing, if I drag this formula down, B7 will move down to B8, which will move down to B9, which will move down to B10, and the same in column C. Now, of course, within any formula, we can move these references around. I can change Tammy's name to Johnson, her first name. Hit enter, and now I have Johnson Smith. So anytime you have a reference, you can move it. But I just want to complete this column, so I'm just going to go to the bottom corner and drag, or I could go to the bottom corner and double click. If I double click, it'll take me until there are no more cells that it would reference, but that'll only work if we don't have a space, so our cells need to be contiguous. Contiguous means no blank cell in between. You can see we have a blank here. Because of this blank column, we can't just double click our entry and hope for it to fill down. The only way we could do that, just so you see, let me show you. I'm going to delete. There, now if I double click, it all auto-populates, but you're not going to do that, so I'm going to undo. So you're at the point where you have concatenate, Tammy, B7, space, Smith, which is C7. You hit enter, and because we have this space, the double click option doesn't work, so we're just going to drag. And now we have all the names. So if when eAssign looks to grade your file, it may look here in cell E in E9, and you will have full credit if this is what you have in cell E9. Okay, so let's move down to exercise 2. Now we're going to split the names into 2 different columns. So we want first name, last name. We want to separate Tammy Smith's name. Now there's a couple ways to do this. One of the ways is to use text to column, but again, I'm focusing in this Excel lab on formulas. So I'm going to show you the left function, the right function, the find function, and the length function. For the first name, because the first name is to the left for Tammy Smith, her first name comes first, we're going to use the left function. So we'll use the left function, and what's the text we want to grab? Well, it's here at Tammy Smith. What are the number of characters? Well, for Tammy, her first name would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters. But for Ashley, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters. For Brandon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters. You can see that I wouldn't be able to just drag my formula. I need to have a way, so if I'd put 6, I have Tammy, but if I drag this down, and again, we have to drag, we can't double click because we have this gap between our data set. You see, I'm not going to work, it won't work for everybody. It didn't work for Brandon. So for the 6, the reason it looks like it worked for Ashley is because Ashley's name has 5 characters, but you can't see it, but it grabbed the space. That's the 6th character here. For Brandon, because Brandon's name has 7 characters, it only went to until O. And Jeremy's name has 6 characters, which is what we entered. We wanted 6 characters, so it worked fine. But again, it didn't work for everybody. How can we have one formula that works for everybody? Well, we specify, we change this 6 to be variable depending upon the name by using the find command. Now, if I use the find command, I have to decide what is it within this text string that that separates, let's say, to make it easy, that separates the first name from the last name. Well, what separates in this text string is the space, right? The space between the names. So let's find that space. Remember, space is quote, space bar, and then quote. So we find the space, that's the text we're looking for, and then we need to enter a comma. Within the text, well, that's within our same text string. Now, start number, the default is a 1, so you don't have to enter a start number at all. That just means starting with the first character, which would be T for Tammy. Typically, that's where you start, so we won't complicate things, and we'll just leave start character off. Default is to start with the first character. Now, you'll see the parentheses end in red, which if you remember from your scientific calculator days, your graphing calculator days, you need to match up your parentheses. So let's put another parenthesis here so we end in the same black parentheses. Hit enter. Now I have Tammy. Drag my formula down. We have Tammy, Ashley, Brandon, and Jeremy. And you can see example Brandon. We have left B18, we're finding the space in B18, and it's giving me the left characters up until the space. That's what it's doing. Now, this is what you should have in your columns. Let me show you how this can change. So if I said at the end of this, if at the end of this formula, if I said to add 3 characters, I'd have Tammy and then her space because it found the space. So I have Tammy with the space and then 3 more characters. Because remember, it had to find the space, so the space is included. Here, it found the space and then it added 3 characters. For Johnson, that would be J-O-H. If I said to add 2 characters, you can see the difference. If I said to take away a character, and I'm doing this for you so you can see how you can get rid of that space that you really can't even see. Look at, we're just going to get their first names. But now all it did is it took the space away. If I take away 2 characters, I'm going to lose the last letter of each person's first name. There we go. What I want you to do to obtain full credit is don't worry about that. Just leave the formula as is. So in cell D16, you should have equals left, parenthesis, B16, comma, find, parenthesis, your quotes with your space, comma, B16, double parenthesis, enter. Drag that formula down. You'll have the first names. Now for the last names, it's a little more complicated because the last name falls to the right. So what you'll want to do here is you want the right, oops, sorry, you want equals first. You want the right portion of this text string. But when we tell it the number of characters, watch what happens. We can say find. We can say the space because you're thinking, oh, find the space within this text, right? And she said that start number, we can just leave a 1, end it off. And there we have Smith. It found the space and gave me everything to the right. Or did it? Look what happens when I drag this formula down. Right, B17, find the space, and then the number of characters, within the text. So we're finding the space within the text. You know what this is doing? Let me make sure you understand. What find is doing is telling Excel how many characters to look at for the right. Just like back here for Tammy when we did left, find was telling Excel how many characters to look for from the left to the right, looking at that space. So it's finding the space. So when it finds the space, it says, oh, the space occurs at, count them, T-A-M-M-Y space would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's looking for the first 6 characters. For Ashley, it finds the space and says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It makes that a 7. Brandon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Makes that an 8. So really, this is an 8 for Brandon. Here for Jeremy, this find the space is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's actually a 7. It's finding the space, which is the 7th character, and then it's returning the first 7 characters from the left. Well, if we do the same thing from the right, it's again looking for the space from left to right, and it's saying, okay, where is that space? Oh, the space is at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 character. So now it counts from the right backwards 6 characters. H-T-I-M-S is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th character being the space, which is why you see a little space here, and then Smith. When you look at Ashley Hall, if we find the space in her name going from left to right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters. So it's counting from the right 7 characters. Well, starting with Hall backwards would be L-L-A-H. That's only 4, plus the space is 5, plus the Y and E is 6 and 7, and that's why we see the EY space Hall. Let's take Jeremy Halverson here. We'll skip Johnson for a moment. And again, we're finding the space. So for Jeremy, we said that's seven characters. So if we count backwards 7 from the right, we have the N, O, S, R, E, V, and L, and that's what we'd be left with. So you see where the left function is very easy to use with the find, we have a little bit of an issue with the right function. So instead of using find all alone, we're going to put another formula in here that's called the length formula. It returns the number of characters in the entire text string. So length just says, what is the number of characters total in this text string? Well, total in this text string, I'm going to show you. If I did the length of Tammy Smith's name, I'd have 11 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus the space is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 characters. If I continue this, Jeremy is the longest name with his space at 16 characters. Again, the space is included. So what I really want is I want to take the 11 characters and then subtract off what we would find for the first name. So watch what happens here. So we're going to take the right of this text string, and we're going to take the length of the entire text string, and we're going to subtract, and this is still all just telling Excel what the number of characters are. So in essence, I could have a parenthesis here. We're going to take the length, but we're not going to, you know what, I don't want to confuse you. We're not going to put that in there. We're going to take the length of the text string, and we're going to subtract the find. We're going to find the space within our text, and we go until we get that black parenthesis, which I have. And look at that, I have Smith with no space. I drag it down, and there's everyone's last name. That's a little complicated of a formula. There is a quicker way to do this with, some of you know, text to columns, but right now my goal is to show you formulas. So what you should have exactly, for example, for Brandon Johnson here, for Johnson, you should have equals right, and then B18, and then comma, and then the length command, and then parentheses B18, and then minus find, and then parentheses, and then your empty quotes, comma, B18, double parentheses. When I say type exactly, I mean don't even have extra parentheses. You want to have it exactly as I have typed for that full credit. You can enter, and now I'm going to show you what it's doing. So what it's doing here is it's saying take the right characters in this text string, and this is telling it how many characters to look for. So take the entire length, which I believe Tammy Smith was 11 characters. Tammy is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus the space is 6. Smith is 5 letters, 6 and 5 is 11. All 11 characters, and from those 11 characters, we're subtracting when we find the space and how many characters are there. Well, 11 characters minus Tammy to the space is 6 characters. So 11 minus 6, leaving us with 5, right? 11 minus 6 is 5, and Smith has 5 letters in the name, S-M-I-T-H, 5. We'll just let's look at Jeremy because he has a longer name. So if I recall, Jeremy had 16 letters in his name. The entire length was 16 letters. Let me check. Yeah, 16 characters. So the length is all 16 characters, and then we're subtracting when we find the space. Well, the space occurs from the left at the 7th character. So 16 total, that's the length, minus 7 when Excel finds the space, that's the 7th character, at the space is the 7th character. 16 minus 7 is 9, so Excel will count back 9 characters from the right and give the result. 9 characters would give us exactly his name because his name is 9 characters long. But now you see how this will work for any name. So for your exercise 1, you should have the following formulas. And for exercise 2, you should have the following formulas. And again, you can always rewind and watch this portion of the video again and make sure you end up with the right formulas. Again, be very mindful of commas, of spaces, of parentheses, of quotes. Type exactly as you see I have typed. And actually, you know what I'll do? Let's make this a little bigger for you. And I'll give you one more peek at these. So we have concatenate, and you notice I have no spaces. We just have the parenthesis, B7, comma. I do have a space in here to note that I want a space between the names. In empty quotes, no spaces, I have a comma, and then C7, and then a parenthesis. And I've just continued that formula down. For the first names, we have left immediately followed by a parenthesis, B16 immediately followed by a comma, immediately followed by the find command, immediately followed by a parenthesis. We have our empty space with our comma immediately followed by B16 and two parentheses to close it off. And then we dragged that formula down. And lastly, for the last name, we have the right command immediately followed by B16 and then a comma, immediately followed by the length function, and immediately a parenthesis, and then B16 again and another parenthesis, minus, no spaces, the find command, then immediately the parenthesis with immediately following a quote and a space, another quote and a comma, and then B16, double your parentheses, and you have your last name. And again, just some text functions if you happen to be working with text. Now, let's do this again, split the name into two different columns so we get another practice with it. But now we're reversed, right? We want to get the first name, which is from the right, and then the last name, which is from the left. So a little bit of reverse. We can go a little quicker. We've done this once. So let's get the first name, which is Tammy, but that comes from the right. So we want to find Tammy's name out, but it's coming from the right. So let's take the length of the entire text string and then subtract, find. Now this time, what we want to do, because we want just Tammy, let's not put the comma. Let's again say that we want to find that space, right? Oops, sorry, we want to find that space within the text. Close it off and hit enter and see what happens. There we go. We have Tammy. See if that works for everybody. Absolutely should, right? Because what it's doing is we're saying take the length of the entire text, which Tammy Smith with a comma now should be 12. SMITH 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus the comma 6 plus the spaces 7 plus Tammy 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The length is 12 minus 12 minus where does the space occur? The space occurs at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. So 12 minus 7 is 5. And from the right, the 5 characters are YMMAT. That gives me Tammy's name. So this will work for everybody. So that's the formula you should have for all of the first names. And again, by dragging it down, you'll have that relative reference so that the text string drags down to the next name in the list. Now for the last name, we want to be careful because we don't want the comma there. So let's see how we can do this. Let's do left. And we want left. And now we have to tell it how many characters to look for. We don't need the whole length. We put the length with the find command together for the right when you're grabbing from the right. From the left, we can just use find. But this time, instead of looking for the space, let's look for the comma. Let's find the comma. And again, the comma is going to need to go in quotes because it's non-numerical. Any text needs to go in quotes. Just like a space would go in quotes, the comma goes in quotes, then we need another comma. Notice I don't have any spaces here. This is all immediately following each stroke of the keys. And now within our text, the default is starting with the first value. See what happens here. Oh, I get Smith, but I have that comma. Because remember, as I talked to you about before, when it looks for the comma, when it finds it, it includes it. How am I going to get rid of it? Well, that's what I was showing you earlier. So what you can do to get rid of the comma is just say, take one away. Back one off. Back one off. And now all the commas are gone. If I backed 2 off, I'd chop off the last letter of their first name. See that? If I added 5 on, I would take the space and then the first 4 letters of their first name. So we can add and subtract to these formulas, but for ours, we just want to subtract 1 to take away that comma. So this is the formula you should have. Again, no spaces. You see, as I started typing, I just continued typing. It was left. No spaces, just keep typing. Parenthesis, grab my text, comma, find, parenthesis, grab my text. No, I'm sorry, not there. The comma goes in the quotes, and then the comma, now grab my text. And I'm going to close off my parentheses because Excel knows to start at that first letter. And then I have that comma, so I needed to, at the very end, in between these 2 parentheses, subtract 1. Then we're all set. So this is the formula you end up with. Okay, we're almost done with this first worksheet. Let's look at some email addresses. So right now we want to create a column of email addresses all at buffalo.edu. I'm going to show you another couple formulas. And this one, instead of doing concatenate, we could use concatenate. Let me show you. I could say, oh, I want to concatenate this name with, and now if I just type at buffalo.edu, because this is text, it's going to say the function is not valid. Because as I told you several times already, all text needs to go in quotes. So now it would work. And I've just put together the username with the email address. So that's one way we can do this, but not the way I want you to use right now. I want to show you a different way. So make sure you follow these directions. So what you're going to do is you're going to take Smith, and you're going to use the and first hand sign. But if you use the and then put at buffalo.edu, again, we're going to have a function that's not valid because Excel doesn't know what to do with this text. It needs to recognize it as text by you putting it in quotes. And now we have Smith at buffalo.edu. Now I'm going to have you nest this function. So now we have all of our email addresses, but typically email addresses are all lowercase. So we're going to take this function and we're going to nest it within the lower function. So just put lower, and what lower does is lower takes all text string and makes it lowercase. Watch. Just put lower and then put parentheses around everything that you had, and now everything's lowercase. Look at that. So the formulas you should have for full credit, and again, notice there's no stopping of typing. It's just lower, and then I have my text at G7, my and first and sign, my quote at buffalo.edu, end quote, end parenthesis. I only have one set of parentheses. Enter, drag my formula down. Now let's extract usernames. So we want to come out with Smith, Hall, Johnson, and Halverson. Okay, well, let's see if we can do that. That looks like I'd be taking from the left, correct? Well, left was our nicer function to use. We don't need the length, remember, the len in the find function. So let's take the left and let's find, this time, instead of a space or a comma, let's find that at symbol. And again, it's text. We're going to put it in quotes within our text. But think, what's going to happen here? Based on what you've learned from this lesson, it's going to put Smith at, Hall at, Johnson at, Halverson at. Watch. Now, that's not the username. We need to take that at symbol away, just as we took the comma away in exercise 3. So all we have to do is insert between these parentheses our little -1. -1 will take that at for sand sign away. If we did +1, it would add the B from buffalo.edu. See that? If I did +1, it adds the B. When I have nothing, it just leaves the at for sat sign and the and sign there. So -1 takes it away. And again, usually usernames are lowercase, so let's encase this, nest all of this in the lower command. So here's what you should have. All in one string equals lower, and then your parenthesis, and then left, and then a parenthesis, then G16 comma find, parenthesis quote, at quote, comma, G16 parenthesis minus 1, double parenthesis, enter. And now you're all set. So what you've done here, and I'm going to make this much smaller for you for a moment, is you have done 5 exercises and hopefully learned some new text commands. I'm going to show you a little quick trick so that I can see that you've not done any hard coding. In other words, you didn't just type. As it says here, you must use formulas for credit. One way I can check that very quickly on any file is when I'm in the file, I can use Control and then the tilde key. Control tilde key, look at that. Shows me all the formulas that are found within my file. So I can see all the formulas that have been entered. That's just a quick tip. Not something you need to do for this assignment. So for full credit for this sheet, you'll have the formulas as I have entered in each section. As we've talked about in each section, you'll make sure that they're entered exactly as I've entered them. And again, not because this is the only way to come up with these answers, but because we want to be consistent for grading purposes. There are different ways to get to the same answers, but I'm just showing you one consistent way. Okay, so now let's move on. In the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to use the binomial distribution function, which we'll use in our lectures, but we're going to really base this on cell referencing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of cell referencing. You have your absolute referencing, you have your mixed referencing, and your relative referencing. What you saw back here in worksheet 1 was all relative referencing. There are no dollar signs around our cells. No dollar signs around your cells is relative referencing. So as the formula moves, the referenced values move along with the formula. And again, like I had said, with any formula, you can just move the references anywhere you want them to be. So if I move both of these up here, I'm going to get Smith. Of course, you don't want to do that. That'll mess up your first worksheet. Control Z is how I just quickly undid that. Control Z is the quick undo. Again, remember, that's just a nice tidbit to know about. But we want to talk about some of the other types of referencing. So let's work on the binomial distribution function. Now, don't worry about understanding the binomial distribution function right now as much as just the referencing portion. So what we're going to do with a binomial distribution function is number s here, so use binom dist, and then number s is number of successes. So the number of successes, number s, will be these numbers here, the x values from 0 to, as you can see, 100. So we want to move with those values. As I move down, if I'm in the cell here, if I'm in cell C9, I want the number of successes, number S, to be 1. If I'm here in G9, I want the number of successes, number S, to be 1. If I'm here in H14, that should be 6. The number of trials is always going to stay put here at cell B3. That's going to be an absolute reference. And then the probability are going to be these values, which we are going to use column references to have the various columns for a 1%, 5%, 10%, 25%, etc. So let's go through this. So we'll do a binom dist, and then number S would be here, which I can't grab right now due to the size of my cell. So one thing you can do is I can just make the cell a little wider, or if I undo that, another thing, undo again, is Control Z. I can just type it. Watch, binom dist, and I know I want cell B8. So watch, you can just type B8. You can even type it lowercase, B8. I want cell B8, and I can see it's highlighted there. I want cell B8, and then my number of trials are going to be here in B3. My probability for this first is going to be here in C7. And then for cumulative, I want you to click cell B4. So you should have binom dist, B8, B3, C7, B4, end it off, hit enter, and it looks great, all is well. But if I drag this formula across, first of all, I have all these pound signs, and all these pound signs mean is that my number is not big enough to fit. And actually, it's not even a number, it's an error. Why do I have an error? Because look, because due to the referencing, these cells have moved. If you remember, back here we have all relative referencing. We haven't put any dollar signs in front of our cells. So when it looks here, the cell it's currently at, it says, oh, for example, B3 is the red. B3 is up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's up 5 rows and to the left 1 row. So that when we go here, it's going to make that same value 03, which would be up from the cell we're in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over to the left 1. So it's just relative referencing. Well, I don't want that to happen. I want B3 to always stay at 100. So on a PC, you're going to press the function 4 key. Some of you will need to do your alt key in function 4 or shift in function 4, but the F4 key is a quick way to toggle through the different types of referencing. You can see me doing that now. And actually, let me make this a little bigger so you can see it closer. There we go. So hitting the F4 key allows me to quickly toggle through the different types of referencing. The first type being your relative referencing. The second type is your absolute referencing, and that's where I want to stop for this one, because I always want this value to be 100. N is not going to change. It's always whatever value is in this cell, whatever's typed in there, whatever's hard-coded. So I want to absolute reference there, and then just hit enter, and look what happens if I drag the formula. Now you'll see in any other cell, that value stayed put. That's called an absolute reference. It absolutely stays in the cell where it was placed, does not move, whereas J4, the false part of our cumulative command, that did move because we haven't referenced it. So let's fix that. So let's take our original B4, which was our false command, and hit our F4 key if we're on a PC. And again, some of you will need to hit your Alt key or your function control key to get the F4 to work. And you hit enter, and now we'll see those two will both stay put. So now the 100 and the false stayed where they belong, and that's good. So now let's see, is everything else working? Well, I need B8 to stay in column B. I need my number S, my number of successes, to stay either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, so that for this cell, the number S is 0. For this cell, the number S is 0. For this cell, the number S is 0. For this cell, well, if I look at this cell, it's grabbing F8 right next door. And the reason it's right next door to the left is because that's how we originally started, and we only have relative referencing. So if I want to remain and stay put in a column, I need to absolute reference the column. So if I highlight that cell and then go through my F4 key, I want the dollar sign around in front of the letter B, and that says we're going to stay in column B. Let's hit enter and see what happens and drag this across. Now, even though these look like 0, it's just a very small probability. Let me back out of this for a moment. What you can see is, let's pick a different one. We'll go here. What you can see is I have the binomial distribution. My number S is where it belongs, here at 0. It stayed put. Even though we moved all the way across, it stayed put in column B. My number of trials stayed put for 100. My probability moved along correctly because in this cell, I want to be in column K for 70%. So that's working for now, but be forewarned, it's going to change. And then my false command stayed put as I wanted it to. So right now, it looks that we're fine. So it appears that I could take all of these. So what I did is I just took the corner, I dragged it across, and then now I should be able to just double click here now that I have everything highlighted and fill this entire table up. Watch. I'm over here in the corner. If I double click, boom, I fill the entire table up. But look, it's all zeros. Well, there will be a lot of zeros in this problem, but there is an error. Let's just take the cell, for example. Look what happened. My probability value, the D8, moved down. And of course it did, because we moved the formula down, so the relative reference moved from 5% down 1. If I were to go down even further, some other cell, we would see, okay, binomial distribution, number S. Well, I'm in row 11, row 13 here. In row 13, so that should give me a 5, which it does, fantastic. My number of trials should always go back to 100, which it did, fantastic. But right here, my probability, if I'm here in column H, which I am, should be 40%. It relative referenced back above. So I need to fix that referencing right from the top. So right from the top here, I need to say, okay, you know what? I do want my columns to change as I move along, but I always want to stay in row 7. Don't move out of row 7. Stay put. So let's go ahead and highlight that C7 and go through the different types of referencing until we get the row reference. Stay in row 7. Now we can drag this across. Whoops, there we go. We can drag it down, and we will see some changes. Yes, some are still 0, but what you should see, and if we go all the way down to the bottom, you should see the bottom corner is 0.3660. Let's pick a random cell and see if you have the same referencing. Make this a little smaller. Let's pick cell here, H15. So in cell H15, what I have is the binomial distribution based on 7 trials, because I'm here in row 15, based on 7 trials. Not 7 trials, I'm sorry, based on 7 successes, and 100 trials with a probability of 40% and the false command. And again, we'll talk about exactly what this means in lecture. This lesson is really more about the different types of referencing. Here, I have the binomial distribution based on 4 successes. So I want to be successful 4 times out of 100. What's the probability that I'm successful 4 times out of 100 experiments with a success rate of 70%? And I want that, false means that exact probability. So what is that exact probability? What's the probability I'm successful 4 times out of 100 with a known 70% success rate? And that's how you should have your, so if in the top corner here, you have entered just as I have entered, and then simply take your top corner and drag it to the right, and then double click now, because everything, there's no spaces between your columns. You're all set. Okay, about 43 minutes in, so let's go into the third part of the worksheet. And this third part of the worksheet, we're going to talk a little bit about some operators and some logic and a little bit of conditional formatting real quick. So for this first one, we're going to use these input values. And I just want you to see that you can get statements to say true or false. So is value 1 equal to value 2? Well, you can put equals value 1 equal to value 2. Are those equal? Well, we both know that, we all know that 1,000 and 3,000 are not equal. This should say false. Perfect. Does value 1 exceed value 2? Well, in statistics, we need to know exceed means greater than. So you start a formula with equals. Does value 1 exceed greater than value 2? Well, is 1,000 greater than 3,000? No, it's not. It should say false. Is the maximum, so I'm going to show you how to use maximum, is the maximum of values 1, 2, and 3, and now we can just grab them all, is the maximum of values 1, 2, and 3, which by the way would be 3,000, right? The maximum of those values is 3,000. Is that less than value 4? Is 3,000 less than 5,000? Yes, it is. That should be true. Is value 1 greater than the sum of values 2 and 3? Is value 1, 1,000, greater than the sum command? The sum of values, just 2 and 3 this time. So is value 1, which is 1,000, is that greater than 5,000? No, 1,000 is not greater than 5,000. That's false. Is the product of value 5 and value 2, product means multiply, Now there is a product command, so we can use that, or we could use the asterisk key, Shift 8. So is the product of value 5, I would like you to use the product. Make sure we do the same exact things, by the way. Remember, let me back off of this for a moment. Remember that what you're entering, what I'm entering, should be exactly the same in order for you to get full credit for this portion of the assignment. And that means even here, don't put C3 comma C4. You want to grab them both as I did and just take C3 and C4. So it's a semicolon between. So let me just make this bigger so you can make sure you see that. So you have C2 equals C3. We have equals C2 greater than C3. We have equals the maximum of C2 through to C4. I don't have the commas and the different cells in there. Is that less than C5? And then is C2 greater than the sum of C3 and C4 with a semicolon? Okay. And then we're going to do is the products. Now we'll go back to product. Is the product of values 5 and 2. So now I have to do them separate. 5, comma, and 2. So 10% of 3,000 we know is 300. So is the product of value 5 and value 2, which is 300, is that greater than or equal to? Well, greater than or equal to is denoted as the greater than sign, then the equal to sign, value 4. Well, 300 is not greater than 5,000. That should say false. Now here, how do we use the AND command? Do value 1 and value 2 exceed value 3? Well, value 1 is only 1,000. That does not exceed. Exceed means greater than. So 1,000 is not greater than 2,000. 3,000 is greater than 2,000, but this says and for and to be true, both logical statements need to be true. So what we'll do here is we'll say and then we need our first logical statement. Well, the first one is value 1 exceed value 3? Does value 1 exceed greater than value 3? Is that true? The second statement is value 2 exceed value 3? Does value 2, which is 3,000, exceed value 3? Well, 3,000 exceeds 2,000, but 1,000 doesn't. So logically, the and statement should be false, because for and to be true, both components need to be true. And only comes back true when they're both true. So that'll come back false. Now the or is different. In the or logical statement, as long as one of the statements is true, the value will be true. So this will be true because 3,000 is greater than 2,000. So let's do it with or. We do or is value 1 exceed, which is greater than, value 3, or is value 2 exceed value 3? Well, value 2 exceeds value 3. So that satisfies the or statement as long as one of them is true. The logical statement is true. And then different than, how do we do not equal? Is value 2, 3,000, different than, you just do opposing less than greater than sign. Is value 2 different than, not equal to, the average of values 1 through 4. So let's just grab them all. Values 1 through 4. Well, let's just find out. Is value 2 different than? I'm going to assume it is. I'm going to assume the average of those values. If I add the 5,000 plus the 2,000 plus the 3,000 plus the 1,000, I get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,000 divided by the 4 values is not going to be 3,000. So yes, they will be different. That's true. Okay, you can see I have this little green corner. That just means Excel thinks I made a mistake. And the only reason Excel thinks I made a mistake is because here I didn't grab all of the data. Well, I don't want all of the data. So I didn't make a mistake. So I want to leave this as is. But if I don't like that little green message there, what you can do is you can go on the error message and you can just say, you know what, ignore this error. I didn't make a mistake. Excel is just trying to warn me, hey, you might have made an error there, but I didn't. So those are the formulas you want to have in exactly as I have them in. Let's just take another snapshot of that. And again, I'll do my control tilde to show you. Whoops, sorry. To show you those formulas. There we go. There's all the formulas exactly as you should have them. And of course, you could always pause the recording at this point. But to finish this off, I did my control tilde again to get rid of the formulas. I want to show you a quick conditional format. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to format these so that all the words true are highlighted in green and all the words false don't have highlighting but have red text. Let's select all of our results. Let's go to the Home ribbon, and in the Home ribbon, pick Conditional Formatting. Let's go to Highlight the cells, and we're going to highlight text that contains. Let's type the word true first. You can see it finds all our trues. And then I don't want it the red, so let's go down to Custom and go to our Fill and just say we're going to fill it with the green option. And then say OK. Now every value that's true will be in green. And let's stay here. We have this highlighted, so let's go back to conditional formatting, highlight the cells, text that contains, and this time, type false, and you can see it automatically takes the false and fills it with light red fill with dark red text. But we don't want that. So let's go down to Custom. Let's take the fill and do no color. So no fill, just click the no color. And then let's take the font and make the font color red. OK. OK, one more time, and there we have it. So now what I want you to end off with here, and this is important that you follow the same steps so we'll know if you've done your conditional formatting right, I'd like you to change the 1,000 here to 10,000. If everything's referenced correctly and you've done your conditional formatting, you should see some of your answers change, your results change, and then of course the conditional formatting will change as well. Let's make this one, there we go, 10,000. Enter, and we've made changes. So this is how yours should end up. I noticed I didn't make any changes to conditional formatting. I didn't make any changes to formulas. All I did was change 1,000 to 10,000. And that's how you should end up. You should also make sure that you do that. Change the 1,000 to 10,000. And this should be the snapshot of what yours should look like. Okay, almost done. These are done with formulas. So today we've gone over several formulas. We've gone over the concatenate formula and how to use the concatenate formula. We've gone over the left with find to count from the left a certain number of characters. The right combined with the length and find function to count from the right a certain number of characters. We've then done the same functions just in a different fashion, just showing you a little more practice where sometimes you have to take away a value. And then we did the lower function, which creates all text lower, along with the ampersand, which is a different way to use for concatenate, to put text string together. And then lastly here, we did the left and the find command. We put a few things together that we had already done to extract usernames from emails. A lot of things that you'll have to do with data entry if you're working with data. Text skills are great to have. Now with the binomial distribution page, the only reason we use the binomial distribution is so that we could talk about the different types of referencing. Remember, there's your just plain relative referencing, which is everything you saw on this sheet. It's just relative referencing, no dollar signs at all around our cells. But then when we went into here, we have our mixture. We have, in this case, our column, our mixed column referencing a specific column, column B, staying put in column B. We can move up and down, but not left or right. Absolute referencing, staying put in cell B3. We can't move at all. We're cemented in cell B3. Row, mixed row referencing says we have to stay put in row 7. We can move left or right, but we can't move up or down. And then again, our absolute referencing, we have to stay cemented in cell B4. And then for logic and conditional formatting, we went over how to do some conditional formatting, and then we went over some of our logical statements to obtain true and false results, which can then be embedded in if statements to come up with different results. But I wanted to talk about operators, exceed being greater than, equal to being your equal to sign, of course. The maximum function, how you can grab more than one cell at a time. The greater than function, the sum function, again, grabbing more than one cell at a time. the product function for multiplication greater than or equal to. And then your and your or. Just make sure when you use and or, you put your logical statements separately. So you have and then we're saying, does value 1 exceed value 3? And at the same time, there's your comma, does value, sorry about that, does value 1, 2 exceed value 3? Same with, you have your or here. And then different than, meaning not equal to an average. Okay, so now, lastly, to end this off, I'm going to show you a few chart tips. So there's no formulas involved here, so this will go a little quicker. But what you'll see here is on the first chart, you'll see we have just this picture, and I know it's a picture because it says up here, picture 5. So graph B is just a picture. Now, I warn you against copying and pasting because then graph A will also say picture, which graph A needs to say chart. And if you click on graph A and it says picture, you won't receive any credit. So please make sure you follow the directions and you don't just do a copy. I could grab graph B, I could copy it, and then I could click off somewhere. I could paste. So now to do copy, I do Control C, and then click off somewhere, anywhere. And then Control V would be a paste, and I could say, oh, hey, I did this, but look it. Now it says picture, so it'll be an obvious cheat and you'll receive no credit for it. I'm going to Control Z, I'm going to undo those steps. Yours needs to be a chart. So if we want to change this chart to look like, so I want graph A to look like graph B, let's follow my lead. So first we're going to change the title. We're going to start there. So for yards, I'm going to type receivers. These are football total yards, just so I make it exactly as it is on the right here. I'm going to move this over a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to bold it. Now I can go to bold or I can Control B with bold. Oh, I didn't type yards. I'm going to be technical. I should type it the same, right? Receivers total yards. There we go. Now, I don't need this legend for only one series of data. So I select the legend and I can right click and delete. Legend gone. These grid lines can disappear. So select these grid lines and I can see they're selected. Right click and delete. Grid lines are gone. The fill here, so now just select anywhere in the middle in the gray region, and now we have the entire fill region. There's no fill, so right click, and I'm going to go to Format Plot Area, and a new menu is going to appear. I want my fill to be no fill. Okay. I also want my border to be no line. So how did I do that again? And I just clicked in the gray region, right clicked, and I went to Format Plot Area, and under the paint can, I needed the fill and the border. So fill should be no fill, border should be no line. Getting there. Because the data labels are on here, I don't need the axes because that would be overkill. So let's get the data labels on first. Let's grab any one of the series, and you can see they're automatically all are highlighted. Right click, and then just pick Add Data Labels. Let's add the data labels. There we go. We have the data labels here. These might be bold, so you can Control B, select one of them and Control B. That bolds them. Now, overkill is having the data labels and the axes on, so just grab your axes, right click and delete. Axes gone. I can actually close out of this chart area. We're looking pretty good. We're almost there. I'm going to tell you, in a proper chart, you should not have these slants. We should not have slanted axes. That's a big no-no when you're creating professional charts. So let's grab these names and let's go up here and get this angle off of there. Now it looks like the font size is a little bigger. I'm going to guess it. Looks like 11 to me. It could be 10. Whether you use 10 or 11, I'm going to use 10 and then bold, Control B. 10 in bold looks pretty close to what I have over here. Now I'm almost there. I need these lines removed. I don't need the borders. It's somewhat distracting. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my series of data so I have all of them. I'm going to right click again, I'm going to format that data series. And now you see I'm going to go to, I have the series options and I have my paint can. Now my paint can is going to be the fill of the actual bars. I have a solid fill. I do want one of them green. I'll show you how to do that in a minute, but I don't want the border. So if you don't see border, you can just click it and you'll see the options say no line. Click off somewhere and look, there the line went away. We're almost there. We just need this one for Chris because this receiver has the most total yards. We want to highlight that in green. Well, if you click Chris, you'll have all of the players. So click Chris again, and now you have just Chris. You can right click, and actually you can just do it right here. Just fill it green. Looks like it's this green color. Fill it green. And then if I compare my two images, I've gone through the transformation to make graph A look just like graph B, but at the same time, you know, these might not be bolded. I'm not going to worry about whether that's bolded or not bolded. That's not a big deal to me. But I want them to look the same, similar, and make sure that graph A, when you click anywhere in the white space here, it still says chart 1, where if you grab graph B, it's going to say picture 5. If your graph A says picture, you've got a problem. Okay, let's go back. Let's go down to the second one here. Let's change this pie chart to a horizontal line chart. And there's rounded edges on this chart. So where shall we start? Well, I can start by showing you the rounded edges. We can really start anywhere. We can start with a title. For consistency's sake, we'll start with that title. So we'll do receivers yards per catches this time. Looks good. I'm going to control B to bold that. Move it over a little bit. Okay, now I have my title in here. I don't need my legend I can see, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that legend. I'm going to just click on the plot area, right click, and we're going to change the chart type. So we're going to change the chart type. Instead of being the pie chart, I want to have this bar chart. So I want to have not a column chart because a column would be the vertical bars. I want the horizontal bars, which I can see here. So I'm going to say yes, I want that horizontal bars, say OK. And now I can see it doesn't look exactly. I need to do some tweaking here. So I'm going to grab this section, I'm going to move it up. I do not need this axis. As I can see, I can delete it, right click and delete. These grid lines, I can right click and delete. I'm getting there. I can take this region, and you don't want the white space. You want your chart to be your focus. So go ahead and minimize that white space in your chart. That's looking pretty good. It doesn't have to be exact. Looking good. I need to add the data labels on. So right click, grab your bars, add data labels. There they are. They are bold this time, I can see. So let's grab one and it automatically grabs them all. Control B is bolded. Again, I'm going to get rid of that border. So grab one and they're all highlighted. I can right click, and actually here I can go to outline and say no outline. There's a little shortcut for you. And the fill, I can choose that blue color. Where is it? I might not be able to find that exact blue color, which is fine. Pick something close enough. And then the last portion is these rounded edges. If you ever want rounded edges, it's very easy to do. You just select your entire, so click in the white space somewhere, right click until it says Format Chart Area. And it's really hard to find actually, but if you go all the way down, you see rounded corners. Just takes a moment. And then we can click off of here. And we've now created the same graph. So you've modified a graph. And then lastly, one more. Let's do a graph to have two axes. So what's happening here is we want to add the revenue. So we have the revenue, but we also want to add the units, and we don't have the units. So what's going to happen is we need to change this chart. And how we're going to do that is I can see that over here again, and this is a picture, so over in this picture I need to change my chart. I can see if I click my chart, here's the data that makes my chart up. Problem is I only have revenue. I need to also get units here, and the question is, can I just drag this across? Well, watch. There we go. Now we have the units, but the units are all lying on the horizontal line. Problem being, that's because this starts at 0 and jumps up to 5,000, and these units are so small. So we need what we call a secondary axis. So if you simply click on your data, you can go to, and you can click anywhere in the data actually, and you can go to change chart type. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't click anywhere. You have to click on one of the data sets. Click on one of the data sets, either one of the data sets. My apologies. Right click, change series chart type, and then we can either take revenue or units and put it on the secondary axis. And it's actually units that we want on the secondary axis. So we're going to take units, we're going to put it over here on the secondary axis, and we're going to hit OK. Look at that. Now we're almost there. What we need to do is we need to fix this up a bit to make it the same. First of all, the units here is a red line. So if you just right click, you can do this right here. You can take the fill here and make the, oh, not a fill. Right now we just have, sorry about that, we want to make this white, right? The fill here for, I've selected the data points. See that? I've selected the data points. I want those to be no fill. So we'll do no fill. Let's click off to see what that looks like. Okay, well we need a black border. So let's grab those data points again. Right click, and we want the outline to be black, not the outline, my goodness, the fill. We wanted the fill to be white. There we go. So I made the outline black. So again, what did I do? Let's undo. Control Z, get me back to orange. Control Z. That's what we originally had. So how are we going to get this to red with diamonds and black? Well, the easiest way would be the first step. Would click anywhere to grab on the orange line, to grab this series, and grab the entire series as I've done now. Right click, and the quickest way would be to take the outline and make everything black. And then take your fill and make your fill white. But now we're going to take our outline, and if we make it red, watch what happens. Oh, our boxes are red. Well, there's an easier way. There's another way to do this. And the way to do this is to just go into the formal process of formatting the data series. So go into formatting data series, and it makes it much easier. Go to your paint can, and now you see you can choose between line and marker, which is an easier way if you have to make little intricate changes. So in our line, we want a solid line that's red, and our marker, so click marker, and then we want actually no fill in the markers, right? And the border, we want a solid line that's black. That actually would have been easier than trying to play around with the little right click idea. And then now if I'm going to be really picky, I can see that these would be diamonds. So I'll go ahead and click on this again. I'll right click, I'll format data series, just trying to show you different things. Let's go to our markers and go to our marker options, and it's not the square that we want. We want to take built-in, and we really want the diamond, right? We might even want it a little bigger. Let's see. No, I don't think so. I think 5 looks good. Nope, it doesn't. So let's go ahead and go back and grab those. We'll go to marker, marker options. I'm going to go with 7. And I know it's not exact, but it's good enough. And this video is getting a little long, so we're almost done. So for the title, you're going to go amount over time. I'd like to try to keep these to an hour. I'm about an hour and 10 minutes in. We just need now to take off the line for our axis. And actually, I need to shrink this a little bit. There we go. Shrink it because I need to fit the word units and revenue And the way I can do that is here, if I grab my chart, if I grab the plus, I can put axes titles. So go ahead and add your axes titles. And for this axes title, going up here and type units. This axes title, we really don't need one, so I can delete it. I need to move, click inside here somewhere, inside your chart area, and you can move this over a bit. And for this axes title, click on it, go up and type in revenue. Looking very good. And all I need now is I need these values to be formatted red. So let's format that axis. Let's take the tick marks. And well, actually, we'll go to the text options first there. We'll go to the text options because I believe those were red, right? We'll go to the text options and we'll make that red. So we have that red fill. So that's good. And then what else? Oh, it just looks like I need to get rid of that vertical line there. And oh, one more thing. I need to add more years in here, right? I need to add the years and more of those values. So let's do those two things. Okay, to rid the vertical line here, I'm going to again grab, click until I can, let's see here. There we go. Until I can grab the axis, and I'm going to right click. And nope, I don't have the axis. I had the chart. Let's do that again. There we go. I have the axis. Whoop, I had it. Let's try it one more time. Axes. I need format. There it is. Format axis. I'm going to go to the paint can and say no line. It's pretty simple. Now the line is gone. I could also, while I'm here, Control B to bold. Make it exactly the same. Control B just bolds while I'm there. And then lastly, to make us out at about an hour and 15 minutes, which is pretty good timing for a lab, I'm going to now have to put in every year here. I'm counting every other year right now. So let's right click. I want to go from 1996 to 2007. Let's format the horizontal axis. The minimum is 1996. The maximum is 2007. And I want to count every year. So I made that a 1. So I have 1996, not 1995, right? There we go. 1996 to 2007. Count every year, and we need our minor to be 0.2. So you have 1996 for your minimum, 2007 for your maximum, your major units every year, and your minor at 0.2. And now we have two graphs, a picture, and you've created a chart which is exactly like the picture. And hopefully learn some new skills in the process. So hopefully you went along with me. This likely will take you longer than to just watch it, of course, but you're going to save this file and you're going to upload your own file to eAssign, and the file will be graded. And of course, if you disagree with the grade in any way, it'll be graded likely within a week and a half or so, hopefully even sooner. If you disagree with the grade in any form, remember you need to email mgq301@buffalo.edu within a week of the grade being posted. All right, everybody, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email mgq301@buffalo.edu. And if this, if anything comes up while you're working on the lab. And I think that's it. So hopefully you've learned some new skills, you've learned some new things with graphs and charts, and you are just building those muscles. Go rest them now for a little bit. Goodbye, everybody.